Howdy folks, I have two competitors, and when I mean competitors, I mean head-to-head competitors in one of the most competitive segments out there. Mid-size 3-row crossovers. Brand new 2022 Nissan Pathfinder competing against the 2022 Toyota Highlander. Both have V6s, both have all-wheel drive, both have 3 rows, and the measurements between the two are really close. The Nissan Pathfinder, well, it's all new, pretty much. I mean, the engine's a carryover, and there's some parts that are a carryover, but for the most part, it's all new. And this front end right here, look down here. They made it look like it's really mean and off-road capable. Yeah, it's not, but that's okay. It's just kind of, you know, to make it look cool and a little bit more butch. That includes the headlights and this chunky grille, which really do hark back to truck design more than car design, and I think it's exactly what Nissan wanted. Check this out. In case you didn't know what you were looking at, you've got Pathfinder written right there. And then you have this design here, which is probably my favorite part, the hood. Now, if you look, it kind of reminds me, at least me, a little bit of Range Rover, the way they have kind of a clamshell design right here. I think that's pretty cool, but not everybody does. That's fine, it's subjective, right? Come on to the back, let me show you one more thing. The rest of this is pretty typical. This cut right here, very similar to a Ford Explorer, except they did this little tiny thing here to make it look different. In case, once again, you forgot, you are looking at a Pathfinder, because those letters are huge. This is the new thing everybody's doing it, the big separated letters. Well, whatever. Anyway, down here, you have this chunky area. Really hard to see the exhaust because it's tucked way under there. And then most vehicles, you'd have a section here that you could pull out and there'd be a tow hitch. It's not on this one, which is a bummer because this vehicle can tow up to 6,000 pounds, which is more than the Toyota. Recently, Toyota went and updated the Highlander, and by doing that they changed the grille and some of the components up front and on the side, but it's pretty much the same vehicle. But what they did do is they managed to make the grille a little less aggressive than some of the other Toyotas that are out there that just have massive grilles. This one's not as bad. Squinty eyes, which look aggressive and mean. Very different front end from the Nissans, and a very different hood. But there is something else they did that Nissan did, and that is kind of making a clamshell looking hood. It's not exactly a clamshell, but look at this. Once again, it kind of drapes over the side. This is something that more people are doing. I think it looks kind of good, and I'm glad Toyota's doing it as well. Come on over here to the back. Basically everything's the same, right? But Toyota was much more restrained by having little letters. And you know, I kind of like that. I don't like the real big letters. This is a personal thing. Also, once again, no tow hitch. If it did have one, it would tow up to 5,000 pounds. And away we go from a dirt road. It's a good pickup. Both these vehicles are actually relatively quick. If you were to actually go and put them up against crossovers and SUVs from 10 years ago, these things would be like hot rods. Both of them do 0 to 60 at sea level in under 7 seconds. Both of them have really good all-wheel drive systems, but I'm going to talk about the Toyotas because Toyota has a new system where they take up to 50% of the torque and throw it to the rear, and then they're able to actually move it side to side and use torque vectoring. And that helps with cornering. Now, I didn't really think that that was much of a thing, but remember, you're basically driving something that is the size and weight of a minivan, maybe just like a 6 inches shorter, but essentially, you know, same thing. Or a giant wagon, there you go. Now, with a giant wagon that's lifted off the ground, you would think that you're going through a tight corner like this one, which has 15 miles per hour. And if I take it at slightly higher speed, let's just say, theoretically, if I did that, that this vehicle might fall on its face. Well, no, it doesn't. I'm actually accelerating through it right now, and what it's done is it's moved torque to the wheel that has the most grip and most effective for getting you through the corner. So it's a performance thing, but it also works in the dirt according to Toyota. And also, of course, snow, which is really where it matters. Not many of you guys are going to try to go boulder bashing one of these. A little bit of history here. The Nissan Pathfinder started out as, well, basically a small off-road truck. Then it went to a unit body, went back to a truck. Then it went to basically a station wagon. I mean, seriously. And then progressively over time, it kind of got built up into this larger and larger wagon, which is basically what you have here. Now, recently, they realized that the continuously variable transmission, the CVT, wasn't a great choice for such a big vehicle, especially one that wants to go occasionally into the dirt, you know, camping, stuff like that. So they revised that with a 9-speed automatic transmission. Now, by doing that, they gave it a little bit more off-road chops. However, there are a couple issues, and they have to do with its off-road numbers, and I'll get to that in a second. But the Toyota, on the other hand, this has remained basically the same recipe from day one. A mid-size, crossover, 3-row SUV, and it's always been about the same thing. And yes, there is a hybrid powertrain, and we're not talking about that today. We're talking about the V6. And ironically, even though this Toyota really is not built for doing any serious off-roading, its off-road numbers in some cases are better than the Nissans. All right, ready for some interesting numbers. If you are thinking about going into light off-roading, you should know that the Toyota has a 17.1 degree approach angle and a departure angle of 23 degrees, and its ground clearance maximum is 8 inches. On the other hand, the Nissan, it has a 16.1 degree approach angle, much less than the Toyota's, 15.6 degree departure, which is much less than the Toyota's, and a 7-inch ground clearance, 1 inch less than the Toyota. So on paper, the Toyota at least has a better approach and departure and ground clearance number. These cameras are cool. I think they're some of the best in the industry, but they go away the minute you put it in to drive. And no, I do not recommend listening to Ted Nugent while driving this vehicle. It just doesn't really work out. They don't match. I like driving the Pathfinder a little tiny bit more than driving the Highlander. I think it's a little smoother. It's not better. It's just different. And that's the thing. You really have to drive these back to back. Jump in one, out of the other, you know, definitely do that. Here's the important part. Competition, there is a ton. Hyundai and Kia build really good, really capable, very smart versions of the 3-row crossover SUV. It sits right in this class, and it is absolutely worth it to look at the Palisade and the Telluride. But every automaker has one. Traverse, the Explorer, the Ascent, the CX-9. I mean, it just goes on and on. Everybody has it. But can they all handle a corner like this? Let's try this corner just a little bit quicker than... You hear that? Toyota didn't make that sound. And the reason the Toyota didn't make that sound is the torque vectoring, I think, actually helped a little bit. This also has a little bit more body lean going through the corner, which is surprising because I thought the Toyota would. They weigh about the same. They're both around 4,500 pounds, give or take. But this vehicle has a little bit more of a sublime ride. So you're giving up a little bit of that performance for a little bit of comfort and cush, between the seats being very cushy and the suspension being really well set up. I think that this one provides a slightly better ride. All right, check it out, guys. Yeah, not that exciting to look at. It's actually the old engine. It's got 284 horsepower, 259 pound-feet of torque. Basically, they pulled out the old one and popped it in the new one, which is strange, and I'll get to that in a second. Now, combined MPG with all-wheel drive, this setup, about 22 miles per gallon. That's not too bad. This has a brand new 9-speed automatic transmission. Feeds the front wheels, and then it has an all-wheel drive system, allowing you to shift up to 50% of the torque to the rear wheels. I thought that Nissan produced a brand new 3.8 liter V6. Bigger displacement than 3.5, of course. And they did. It's in the Frontier, and it's really powerful, and it's fairly efficient. And I thought, wouldn't that be great to put into this? And they didn't, which is really strange. In fact, this is the only powertrain that you can get. Aha! Now we have a 295 horsepower engine. It's a 3.5 liter V6. Puts out 263 pound-feet of torque. So it is a more powerful powertrain than the one in the Nissan. It also gets up to 23 miles per gallon combined in this configuration. Once again, a little tiny bit better than the Nissan. It's hooked up to an 8-speed automatic transmission that feeds the front wheels, and you can get it with all-wheel drive. Now here's the interesting part. There are several configurations that you can get with a Toyota Highlander that are not available for the Nissan. As an example, let's say you want a hybrid, you can get a hybrid and you can get all-wheel drive. It's an all-electric all-wheel drive system for the rear wheels if you get the hybrid. Or you can get a regular all-wheel drive system with this vehicle, or like this one in particular, you get the torque vectoring all-wheel drive system. Is it quiet? Yeah, actually it's fairly quiet. Is it as comfortable as the Nissan? I think that the Nissan might have a slightly better ride, a slightly more forgiving ride, but this vehicle, at the very least, is compliant until you put your foot down, then you really hear it. Yeah, you can hear that, right? You can hear that? Yeah. But it's also a very serene place to spend your time because, let's face it, if you're stuck with owning one of these vehicles, you're probably moving humans around. And if you're stuck moving humans around, you're probably going to want a place that's nice and quiet and simple and no big deal for day-to-day driving, putting hundreds of thousands of miles on a vehicle. And that is exactly what these were built for. One final note, which I want to make very, very clear. You are never going to buy one of these that's particularly exciting. However, in the past, recent past, I drove the Mazda CX-9, which directly competes with this vehicle. The Mazda CX-9 is a much more enjoyable vehicle to throw around corners, and it's got a lot more brio to it, especially up here at high elevation where that turbocharged engine really kicks in and makes it feel a lot faster. But this has a lot more tech, especially with the new screen. It has a much more comfortable ride. And, you know, honestly, with this torque vectoring setup, it doesn't handle too bad. Yes, if I had to pick one out of all of the crossovers that are available right now, with third rows and all this other stuff, which one would I pick? It would probably be the Mazda, because the Mazda is a little bit more fun to drive, and I'm all about fun. But, man, this thing is really well put together. And there's a damn good reason why they sold 250,000 of these last year. Actually, last year they sold even more than that. Last year, it was a COVID year, yes. They sold more Highlanders than ever before, which is crazy, right? So yeah, there you go. Highlander's super popular during a pandemic. So whether you get the S base model, the SV, the SL like this one, or the Platinum, you're getting the same amount of cargo space on the inside. That is 16.6 cubic feet of cargo space back here behind the third row. And then on top of that, yeah, you got some extra cargo space here. Now here's a funny thing. Every once in a while when you pull on these straps, now this is for the headrest in the third row, they're supposed to go up like so, but this little thing is a little bit, right, so the kid's there, oops, sorry kid, sorry, I'll get this soon, oh, sorry Junior, oh, boom. So yeah, just do it like that and you're good. Okay, so lifting up this lever, boom, fold that down, you get up to 45 cubic feet of cargo space behind the second row. And to lift it up, pull the strap, and you bring it, boom, right back up. Piece of cake. All right, now you want maximum cargo space. You can get 80.5 cubic feet of cargo space simply by folding down these seats. Now keep in mind that this maximum cargo space is not exactly flat because it kind of goes upward and it's a bit raked, but the good news is center row, you can get them in captain chairs. In this case it's a bench seat, but they do slide and they do recline. In we go to the second row. Now even with the seat almost all the way up, I still have almost adequate leg room, but oh yeah, and the seats recline. See what I'm saying? Yeah, nice little power ports and climate control. I'm gonna go in the third row because you guys love to see the fat guy go in the third row. There's a button behind the seat. Yeah, see the whole thing slides forward. It also works on that side. Now, it's not very comfortable with the headrests down, so I do suggest that you push them up, and for a big guy like me, Both of them, yeah. Okay, now just so you know, I'm sitting sort of with my legs a little crossed, and they are a little mushed, but actually I have really good headroom, and the seats aren't terribly uncomfortable. Now, if somebody was sitting in front of me, and they were nice enough to slide forward a little bit, that wouldn't be Roman, by the way, but maybe Tommy would, then I would have enough leg room to sit back here and be comfortable for a little while. I do have vents in the back. I do have a cup holder. Look over here, plug ports. Yeah, it's not such a bad place to be. Now, Toyota gives you a ton of choices. You can get the L, the LE, the XLE, the XSE, the Bronze, the Limited, or the Platinum. And you will get 16 cubic feet of cargo space behind the third row. And then, on top of that, you have storage down here. Now, this one does come with these mats, which is something you can up and get with different trims. I love them, especially considering how messy I am. Now, even though there's less cargo space behind the third row, this is 16 as opposed to what Nissan has. It's a little tiny bit more. It has more cargo space from here on. And that's including, so you got to hold this up all the time, drop it, 48.4 cubic feet of cargo space behind the second row. Not only that, but a much more flat surface. The area here, by the way, to get stuff in and out, the Nissan's a little bit higher, a little bit more truck-like, square. This is more like a wagon in terms of the way it's kind of squat. Liftover is very close between the two of them as well. Now, 84.3 cubic feet of cargo space is available, but you can get captain's chairs like this or a bench seat. Now, there is one thing Nissan has over this, and that's simplicity. Being able to fold down the second row takes a couple steps. You have to pull up on the handle, like so, and then you have to pull that lever down. But just like the Nissan, the seats do slide and they do recline. Sitting inside the Toyota, second row, very comfortable, lots of leg room, and the adjustment's kind of weird because you have to go to the side in order to make it go up, but you can make it way up, which means the third row gets a lot of space. So the useful space in this is notable. What's interesting is that the Nissan actually has a 2-inch longer wheelbase, and it's almost 3 inches longer in total length. Despite that, Toyota's made the most of this space, which is interesting. And the seat goes down. If I have my legs up like this. Oh, yeah. Okay, so a couple things. First of all, my head is hitting the roof back here. These seats do recline, so I could bring it up a little bit if I wanted to sit like bolt upright, but you have to reach over to do that. All right. So the seating position is not as comfortable in the third row as the Nissan, not at all. Headroom is restricted. I can really, yeah, I'd have to slouch. I slouch anyway. And leg room, I'm sitting lower, so my butt's lower to the ground, and as such, my legs are higher up, so at least in that realm, comfort is not as good. But if you do have captain seats like this, one of your legs can stretch out. Yeah. All right, Nissan time. Now I gotta tell you, ever since I drove the first Nissan new Pathfinder, I was impressed with the interior layout and the seats. Very comfortable. In my book, a little bit more comfortable than the Toyota seats, at least for my body. Now, flat bottom steering wheel, once again for my body, so I can get my tubby butt in here without rubbing. It's supposed to be for sport. It's no sport. Screen size, you can get an 8-inch or a 9-inch, and if you get the Platinum version of this vehicle, you can get an all LCD instrumentation screen. I think it's completely unnecessary. This works actually really well. Now, as for the rest of the interior, it's a well thought out layout. I kind of wish the buttons were a little bit bigger, but they're no worse than the Toyotas. And this, I'm not so sure that I'm a big fan of this shift knob. Now, bear in mind, it's easy to use. Once you get used to pressing park, everything else, making it go in reverse, you go up, drive, you go down, pretty easy to use. And then this. Now, this is interesting because unlike the Toyota, you can choose several different drive modes, and some of them are actually usable off-road. And we've already done that with this vehicle, but I did want to talk about this as we're driving. A welcome place. Toyota Interior. Not quite as comfy as the Nissan seats to me. They're okay. I mean, they're perfectly good, but I think the Nissan seats have a little bit more give than the zero gravity seats. These just kind of feel a little bit small on my large American butt. Now, speaking of large, 12.3-inch screen. This is part of Toyota's new infotainment strategy that is now blanketing all products that they're making. In the next couple of years, you're going to see this giant screen available on many different vehicles that Toyota builds. And there's a lot of in-house stuff that this screen does. We'll cover that in a second. But one thing I really do like that Toyota does that Nissan doesn't do, they have a conventional shifter. Now, I know that sounds kind of silly. Oh, what's a big deal? I kind of like being able to shift into park instead of hitting a button. And even though it's an 8-speed, not a 9-speed, it works really well. And what else I like is that the layout here gives me quick access to compartments that Nissan doesn't quite have. It's got extra storage in some interesting spots. That's really helpful. In terms of the buttons, most of them are bigger than the Nissans, which are great, but some of the other ones are about the same size. And thank you, Toyota, for having a volume knob and a tune knob. I know that sounds silly. I know I'm an old man, but I really do like having that. The rest of the interior is very similar to the previous generation, or previous version of the Highlander. It's very simple. It does have a digital face right here connected to two conventional gauges, which I like. It's a nice combination. Overall, this is a comfortable place to be. I think the Nissan may have it in comfort and perhaps a little bit in isolation, but in terms of tech, for once, Toyota is king. Now, by the way, in terms of power, even though the Nissan produces less power, it's actually a little bit quicker from 0 to 60, at least at sea level. I think it has to do with gearing, but the bottom line is that both vehicles are really, really close, and you can price them head to head. Toyota outsells Nissan in terms of this vehicle. 6 to 1, 5 to 1, depends on the year. And for good reason. Toyota is known for reliability. They've been building a very solid product with many different versions for a long time. But you know what's interesting? Nissan's been doing that as well. Did you know that there was a hybrid version of the Pathfinder? There was one with a supercharged 4-cylinder engine. They've had regular 4-cylinder engines. They've had V6s, obviously, a whole bunch of them. The interesting thing is that with Nissan, they don't really stick with it for too long. They want to kind of evolve with the times, which is why Pathfinder has gone from being a truck to what essentially is a cross between a wagon and a minivan. It's the same thing with the Highlander, but the Highlander kind of started that way. Both vehicles provide a ton of comfort. Both vehicles are great for road trips. And both vehicles have really good power. Bottom line, both vehicles drive quite good. This one, the Nissan Pathfinder, feels a little bit more cushy and comfortable, whereas the Toyota feels just a tad more sporty, even though the Nissan is a little bit quicker. There you go. That's basically everything I needed to say in 10 seconds as opposed to 2 minutes. Price-wise, both these vehicles are very competitive if you get the V6 all-wheel drives, if you also get the lower trim models, or if you get both of these with the higher trim model, the Platinum. So it's around $51,000. That's what this Toyota runs. Now, bear in mind that Nissan didn't give us a Platinum, and if they did, it would be about the same price, $51,000 and change. This one is closer to $47,000 because, well, it's the SL, so it drops down a little bit. Now, regardless, in terms of comfort, convenience, capability, overall driving, and the fact that on paper one is better than the other, I think I would give it up to the Hyundai. Yeah, that's right. The Palisade is probably better. I know, I'm kidding, guys. Now, I think that the Nissan is a little bit more enjoyable in terms of its comfort and its quiet and its road manners, but I think that Toyota, well, it wins on paper. So it's a really hard choice between the two of them, but you really can't go wrong because I think they're both quality vehicles. I'll see you next time.